Thanks for
Oh,
joining us, Anna.
can I ask you a quick question?
Yeah.
Are you guys okay with having an explicit warning applied to your uh
Yes.
We really
Yes.
wouldn't have it any
Corey
other
asked us last night. I was
way.
like, there will explicits are fine. We will post it that way. Don't feel like you need to filter yourself in
No,
any
please
way.
don't. Please don't filter yourself.
No.
You know,
okay? Because I
please
swear
do.
like a sailor.
So
As do
speak
I.
genuinely.
This is why we get along so well so soon.
Well, this is our first recording. It may not be the first episode that airs, but this is our first recording. So, Anna, thank you for being our first guinea pig. This is in transition. So, today we are fortunate enough to have Anna Addoms with us, who I met at the crew. For those of you that know what the crew is, was a crew member, and Corey, my lovely co-host, who also I met at the crew. See, the crew's bringing people together. A little bit about Anna before we get started. Anna loves to talk about how to build a sustainable business so you love what you do and make money. Yay. How to use technology and automation without overwhelm, and how to gain visibility and growth in your business without spending a lot of money while making your business work for you. The way you work so you can focus on what you do best, which we all need more of that in our life. She is also on a mission to make small business owners build their dreams through sustainable business growth and automation without tech overwhelm. Who doesn't have tech overwhelm every day? Anna has 15 years of startup operations, technology, and marketing experience in the mobile, luxury, and advertising sectors. She has served as the director of marketing and partner relations and managed a client portfolio with an average 20 million per year budget. So big budgets. Awesome.
Yep.
Welcome, Anna.
Thanks. I'm happy to be here. I'm so excited for this.
We're excited too, because Anna's going to talk to us all about moving from the tech space, which clearly she has a ton of experience in, to building her own business. And we always like to start this podcast with this first question of what was the catalyst for this transition from tech to starting your own business?
So this is actually my transition from tech to deciding to do this for myself and building something that was making me happy and fulfilled full time came from a couple of different things. I love technology. I love startup space. It's so much fun for me and it makes my brain light up and I enjoy it, but it is an incredibly toxic culture, especially in Silicon Valley as a woman. And it's really, they do not have balance. So it creates really super unhealthy habits around life and time outside of work. And so I had been working in San Francisco for about 7 years at that point. And I was burning out like clockwork every 18 months. Like,
Oh, wow.
doesn't fail. 15 to 18 months into a new company, I would be hitting a wall hard and I'd be miserable and I wouldn't be spending time outside of work taking care of, the stuff that fills my cup. And I wasn't enjoying living in one of the most beautiful parts of Northern California. And that was not cool for me. But I was also feeling like there wasn't really a way off the hamster wheel, so to speak, because it was just, I would quit and promise myself I was going to take time off. And then I would get a really interesting offer and I'd pick up some freelance work on the side. And then suddenly I'd be back in another company and it would start all over again. And I wasn't taking the time to figure out how not to burn out.
Okay.
So, and I was, working for a company that I was really enjoying working with. I was working with big companies. I was working exclusively in mobile technology. And then out of nowhere, my mom was diagnosed with stage 4 pancreatic cancer on
God.
Martin Luther King Day.
Ooh.
She had a doctor's appointment and her doctor called her and said, instead of you coming to the office, I think we should just send you straight to the emergency room. I want you to have an ultrasound and they're going to do it faster if we send you to the ER on a holiday. So she went to the emergency room and the ER doc said, we're going to skip the ultrasound completely. I want to do a CAT scan because I think this is bigger.
Oh.
They did her CAT scan and without even saying anything, they said, we have to admit you. So she called me. I was driving up to wine country from San Francisco to meet friends. She called me and said, I've been admitted to the hospital and they don't know what it is, but it's bad. And I pulled over on the side of the road and got off the phone with her and just burst into tears. Called my friends and said, I can't do this. Like, I can't meet you guys. I drove to my uncle's house in Sonoma because he was close by. And I was like, I got to recalibrate before I drive home. Called my dad and said, I need you to get me on a plane, like now. And so I got on the last flight out of San Francisco that night. And I flew straight back to Denver to be here, to figure out what was going on. I called my boss, I called my VP, and I was like, look, I managed two of the biggest clients for the company. I recognize that walking out the door without any idea of what's going on is not professional, but this is bigger than that. Yeah. And they said, look, we've got you. Don't worry about this. Check in and let us know when you know what's going on. We have sales week in a week. So if you can come to Boston, we want you to be there, but it's totally okay if you can't.
Okay.
And then it turned out to be a really awesome thing that I didn't go to Boston because Snowmageddon happened. And that was the year of like 7 feet of snow.
What year was that?
2015.
Okay.
And my mom passed away 6 weeks to the day she was diagnosed.
Oh my gosh.
So and actually that day is tomorrow, 8 years ago. So for me, realizing that I was doing something while I was happy for periods of time, I wasn't building something that fulfilled me. I was still on that hamster wheel of like, go, 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 go. I wasn't taking care of myself, and realizing that life is short and unexpected things happen. I said, I got to figure out how to do better at taking care of myself. But I didn't really know how to make that decision while I was grieving. I just knew that something was going to have to change. So I cleaned out my mom's house and spent time with my siblings and sorted out her estate and went home to California and went back to work and did a bunch of stupid things. Like I let my boyfriend move in with me and I shouldn't have. Shortly after I went back to work, we went through a major reshuffle in my company. And it was one of those like a course correction of like staff and size and the market. And I have been through those. So I thought, cool, if they do this right, this is the only time it should happen. And I want to see what happens. I don't want to leave just because we're going through this shift. So, and they had treated me, taken really good care of me while I was out dealing with this. And so I decided to stay. And then 2 months later, we went through it again. And I said, this is the ego of the CEO talking, and I'm not sticking around to watch this burn to the ground. And I don't really want to be here anymore anyway. Like my whole team and I basically all resigned within like 3 weeks of each other at that point, because we were all like, we all see the writing on the wall. Nobody wants to be here to watch you burn this to the ground. And we're not serving anybody by doing that. So we all quit. And I promised myself this time that because I had a different cushion and a different set of boundaries, and my mom was my person, that like I didn't have that emotional safety net, that I was actually going to do the work this time, that I was not going to go back to work. And I did. I spent 3 months just being and exploring San Francisco and doing random things during the week while everybody else was at work, and catching up with friends who'd been laid off during this big course correction. And we were all, spending time together and building relationships. And that was really good for me. And then 2 of my best friends graduated from Stanford from graduate school. And one of their parents was starting a new company in North Carolina. And he said, you're the person I've been looking for. I want you to come to North Carolina and meet my team. And I want you to see if this is something that you think is viable. And he asked me to step in and help build a med tech company that intersects mobile technology and mental health. And of course, that felt really like resonant for me as I was grieving, because it was all about depression and anxiety and trackability and having better communication with your care team. And so I went back and forth to North Carolina for a few months, and we made a decision and they gave me an offer. And I thought, this is a really good way for me to make a decision about getting back into the game at a different level on the client side versus the agency side, to have a much bigger impact on something that I believe in, that's not just technology for the sake of making money, and moving to North Carolina was an opportunity for me to live someplace that didn't have the go, go, go culture that San Francisco has turned into. Like, I remember being at art school in New York and knowing that New York is the city that never sleeps. And San Francisco was not that. And San Francisco was not that when I moved there. But by the time I left San Francisco had become a clone of New York in that energy cycle, especially in tech. And so I thought small town, slower pace.
Yep.
Southern culture is completely different than anywhere else in the United States too. I was like, this is going to be a cool, clean slate for me with a community that I already know. And so I moved. I packed up my whole life. I packed up my mom's cats for the second time in like a year, moved them all the way across the country. And let me tell you, traveling with 2 cats in a single carry-on is a serious adventure.
I take your word on that.
Yeah, lots of drugs for them. I wish for me.
Not for me, but I wish.
Because I had to drive when I got off the plane.
Wow.
So I moved to North Carolina to sort of test the waters on being involved in this at a different pace. And I spent a year helping build this company. And at the end of that year, I realized that I was the only woman on my team. I was the only person on my team under the age of 60. And the good old boy culture in North Carolina is still going real strong.
It's a thing.
It's a thing. And I was not feeling that at all. I'm still an founding member owner of this company. It still exists. It's doing a lot of nonprofit research right now. Cool. It's being used in nonprofit research now. So, but I said, I can't, this is not fulfilling me. We're not on a path to do something that we thought we were on. You guys don't need me anymore. So I'm going to take a step back. So I took a step back and I thought, okay, I don't want to stay in North Carolina. I live in this very small town where half the population lives below the poverty line and is predominantly managed by a very Christian university, which was fine, but not really my scene. So I missed being in a city. I didn't really want to stay in the South, but I also didn't want to move back to San Francisco. So I came home to Denver, which I also thought was not anywhere in the cards. And it turned out to be a great decision. And I came home, I moved back, and I came back and I promised myself, I was already freelancing at that point because I'd gotten a couple of really cool offers while I was leaving my tech company to just do some consulting work. So I came back with a client list already like in my hands that I was actively working with. And that list grew, but I kind of thought I'm not actually, I wasn't really thinking about doing my own thing at that point. I was thinking this is a good way for me to figure out what I want to do next while I'm still, keeping my hands in things. And so I gave myself 6 months to find a job, to do interviews, to figure out what companies I wanted to work for, because we have a thriving tech scene in Colorado. And by the end of 6 months, I had a fuller client list as a consultant. I wasn't really excited about any of the companies that made me an offer. And I realized I didn't really want to stop working for myself at that point. But none of it was super formal. It hadn't been, I didn't have structure. I didn't have a business model. I didn't really know what I was doing besides I just kept saying, like, clients kept hiring me to do something that I was good at. So I was like, why not just keep doing this and then figure it out as I go? So that's what I did. And my philosophy for the first 4 years or the first couple of years of my business was jump off every cliff, metaphorically speaking. Take every not every opportunity, but explore all of the unknowns, do the off the wall stuff, say yes to weird things.
Take the risks.
Take the risk. And that's what I did. It was super fun. And I promised myself that in doing what I was doing, that I was building something that I wanted to do every day, that I didn't want to have mornings where I didn't want to get out of bed, or I was dreading going to meetings, or any of the stuff that made me not happy working for other people, with other people. And for a long time, that was the case. And then I realized that I'd ended up with a bunch of tech companies in Silicon Valley as clients who were paying me a lot of money.
Yeah.
And I was doing really cool things, but I was dealing with really misogynistic CEOs who I truly believe are sociopaths, really toxic corporate cultures, no women on those teams, no real diversity. And I worked, and then the pandemic happened. And instead of everybody else who took time off because everybody didn't know what was going on, I was teaching people how to build their businesses online at that point. I was working with small business owners at big tech companies, and they were all like, what the hell are we doing now? So instead of having way more downtime, like most people did, I worked 90-hour weeks for all of 2020.
Oh, wow.
Because I was so busy. And because I live alone. Like, I love the fact that I live alone. I love my life. But I didn't have a reason. I didn't have the capacity to leave my house because we were all locked in for the first 3 months of COVID.
Yeah.
And I didn't have a reason. So because we were all stuck at home and I was alone, I didn't really have a reason to walk away from my computer at the end of the day like I do now. So I didn't really have structure, which meant that I was working 14, 16-hour days because there wasn't anything else to do. And I was busy. And by the end of 2020, I was like, you guys are toxic. This is really bad. I hate my job. And I did not build my company to hate my job.
Yeah.
Did not go through all of that shit to hate my job and hate the company that I was building. So I fired all of them.
Wow.
Even the big tech companies.
Yep. I also fired 2 of my mid-sized companies that were not tech companies.
Okay.
But I basically said, if I feel icky working with you, or you're doing something that violates my ethics, or really you don't need me anymore and you guys are just paying me because it makes you guys feel good, I'm not taking money for that. Like, I have better boundaries around taking money for not doing anything.
Yeah.
And so what did we do? I fired everybody but 2 clients that I was working with. And I took most of 2021 off because I just couldn't, I was so burned out that I couldn't actually do the work that I was doing.
I was about to ask you that because you were saying that you were working 14, 16, 17-hour days, all throughout COVID for the most part. Where did the burnout come in? I mean, when did it happen? And did you feel like you were back in that same spot that you were in?
That's what I was going to ask.
In San Francisco, when you were in all these other employer-employee relationships.
It definitely felt like that. That's actually how I realized that that's what was going on. Was that I started realizing that I was exhibiting all of the behaviors I had when I was working in tech, and I was pushing through instead of evaluating why I was not happy or what wasn't working. And it happened. Let's see. It happened right around. It happened like right before Thanksgiving, I want to say, is like when it truly hit me, because I'd been going kind of nonstop for about 8 months at that point. And the world was reopening a little bit. We were traveling, but we weren't traveling. Like, I spend Thanksgiving in California with my uncle, and I spend Hanukkah and Christmas in Colorado with my immediate family. And so I was really struggling with the fact that part of how I cope with my whole family, because there are a lot of us, there are like 20 people at my parents for Christmas, is that I go to California and I decompress and hang out and fill my cup with my people there and stay away from my huge family for both sets of holidays. And so I was really struggling with the fact that I didn't have that
safety net.
Recharge. Yeah, and that recharge space. So I sort of sat down and I did the thing that I really advised to never do. And I just I made a split-second decision and did it. And I just fired everybody. There were a couple of clients where I actively said, like, I'm firing you because you're violating all of these ethics and you did something egregious that like violates the terms of our agreement, and you're doing something horrible within your own company that I can't stand behind. And I had some clients where we were almost to the end of a contract, and I said, look, it's been a pleasure working with you and we've come a long way, but you do not need me anymore. And we should not continue beyond the end of our contract.
What was the pushback on that?
I had a couple clients who were really freaked out, but most of my clients totally understood because I also practice a philosophy of I want you to not be tied to me or my agency for life, which means that my goal is that I will get you to a point where you are self-sufficient enough to know how to go hire people to fill those roles or to just know how to do it, because you should not be tied to one company indefinitely.
Yeah.
So they were all really really okay, because I framed it as we're really like, you really don't need me anymore. If I thought you needed me, I would not be making this decision. And that's why I kept the 2 clients that I continued to work with did still need that. And that was a level of I can do this and still take a break.
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that you could take 2021 essentially off.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was kind of I didn't really intend to take all of it off, like truly. But I was so burned out that there wasn't an option. It wasn't an option not to.
Okay.
And then I was sort of getting antsy and feeling bored. And that's generally not a good sign for me because I have to do many, many things. And so I started putting some feelers out and deciding what I wanted to do next in Q4 of 2021, which is also something I never do. Like I never take on new clients at the end of a year because it's the end of the year and nothing gets done after like the 15th of November.
Exactly.
So I remember having that conversation with you.
Yeah. And I actually had 2022 was one of those really interesting quarters. Q4 of 2022 was an interesting space. And it's similarly in that regard of people being like, we got to start doing this now. And I'm like, why? It can wait till January. Like really, I'm like, there are 9 executable weeks of time in Q4. That's my rule because nothing gets done from the 15th of November to like the 1st of December at minimum. And then nothing gets done after the 2nd week of December until like mid-January, ever.
I think I have a lot of friends that work for companies where, specifically one here in town, here in Fresno, where they shut down last 3 weeks of the year. You're not coming to work. That's your time to rest, to recharge, to focus, to be with your family, to be with your loved ones, to do whatever you do in this time of year. And she tells me, she's like, and then they do it again for like 2 weeks in the summer. You know, like that's your time to rest, you recharge, go on vacation. That's on top of their PTO.
Right.
And
that's like, what should be happening.
Yeah. Yep. And I'm like, your employer gets it.
Well, and that's what I say to my clients is I say, look, I will be available. Like I do a lot of stuff that doesn't require my interaction with you during those times because I get a lot more done when I don't have to have meetings.
Exactly.
But if you want to commit and you actually show up, I don't have a problem with this. But I have spent so much time where you guys all think you're going to do it and then it doesn't happen that I don't want to put those meetings on the schedule.
Yeah.
So my rule is I am happy to work on stuff and give you things to work on, but we're not meeting during that window unless
something's on fire.
Something is on fire, exactly. Or my rule is if I'm out of town and on vacation, it's bleeding on fire, or there's a critical error in technology, like your Zoom account.
It worked fine last night. It just fine. Right, it's a mini Mercury retrograde. That's what
I want to go back to the burnout piece of this because I feel like that's such a resonant piece for so many women where it's like we experience the burnout and the burnout is sometimes the catalyst. I mean, you had multiple pieces there that felt like they were a catalyst to what ended up happening. And some of it wasn't even intentional, right? Like you said, you're like, I didn't really set out to start my own business. It just kind of happened. But I think the burnout piece, speak to me about like, now that you've gone through it this many times, like experiencing that burnout, knowing how do you recognize it now and not let yourself get to that point?
I start recognizing it now based on my exhaustion levels. One of the biggest things that helped me figure out how to do better at taking care of myself and building a structure in my business that worked for me was learning about human design. And so I found human design shortly after I burned out and fired all my clients and leaned into and it sort of was there and I knew about it and I knew that it existed, but I didn't really understand it. And it's really deep. It's a lot of information. It is not a like it's not like the Myers-Briggs where you just sort of get your type and you kind of know what it is. It requires a lot of learning and paying attention. And it's different for everybody. Like you and I could be the same type in human design and have completely different experiences.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And so I was really impressed because I felt like it was the most accurate thing I'd ever found to like as a blueprint for how my energy cycle worked and the way I operate with humans and how I think about helping and asking for help and resting and recharging and spending time. And I'm a projector, which means I don't have a built-in motor center that's activated, which means that I do not do well when I'm working 12-hour days or when I'm even working like 8-hour days, like straight. I work really well in blocks of time and I need rest in between. And I don't compromise on sleep, which is why I don't like doing things like going to Vegas because I don't do all-nighters anymore.
Yeah, it just
Okay.
Sleep is my gospel and rest is my like watchword. So for me, it's rest is everything from I need a nap to I just need to not be looking at my computer and I want to go outside or I need to veg in front of the TV. But I just need to let my brain turn off for a little while. And sometimes all I need is 15 minutes and sometimes I need a day to do it. But leaning into like using that as a methodology for listening to my body makes it easier for me to catch when I'm pushing myself too hard and take a step back. It also will, and I also have learned through my human design to really listen to my inner authority. So I have a splenic authority in human design, which means that my instinctual response to saying yes and no to things is tied to my fight or flight response. So when my body is giving me an oh yes moment, it's I want to stay here and do this, and it feels really good. But when I get a no response, it's instantaneous. And I get that like pit of my stomach feeling and that like hot flush that just like runs down your spine.
wow.
And I can tell you, but I can tell that now within about 30 minutes of having a conversation with somebody about whether or not I want to work with them.
Ooh.
Oh, wow.
And learning to listen to that and tap into it, because as your spleen and a splenic projector, it doesn't tell you over and over again. It tells you once and then you're done because it's tied to your fight or flight. So like you're either dead or you're still alive. And if you're alive, you made it through it. So it doesn't tell me over and over again. And I realized that I was getting that pit of my feeling, hot flush down my spine feeling with those clients that I was getting really serious no's for every time I thought about going to those meetings, doing that work, engaging with those teams, without realizing that that's what my body was like. That was my body's visceral response to saying, you got to get out of this.
Wow.
So now I really tap into that. So I put new boundaries in place when I came back to work. I said, no more tech companies or no more tech companies that are only run by men. So I only work with companies that have women on their teams, women on their boards. I very rarely say yes to tech companies as an industry anymore, just because there's not a lot of wiggle room.
Yeah.
I work almost exclusively with small business owners, female small business owners. I don't work with people for more than 18 months at a time, one-on-one. And setting those boundaries also makes it way easier for me to know what my limits are. So now I don't burn out as often. And
you enjoy what you do more.
Yeah, I love it. Every day, I love getting up every day and working on my client projects. I love building my business. I love the flexibility. And I will also say that part of burnout for me was realizing that my self-care, like methodologies, are very much time by myself is a big thing for me. So like I can be super social and I love being around people. Like this is giving me lots of energy and I'm feeling really hyped up right now. But I will crash when we get off the phone because I'm tapping into both of your energies. And so I need more time by myself to recharge. And so I do a lot of that. But the biggest thing I do for myself is I travel. And the pandemic took that off the table at a big, big level. And I spend 3 to 6 weeks every year outside of the country. So for 2 years running, I had 3 trips that kept getting rescheduled, that kept getting canceled, that kept not happening. And I was like, it's not really safe to be getting on a plane and spending all that time abroad or being in places where the system is already taxed. We should not be putting tourists who are going to make it worse and bring outside things in. I'm a conscientious traveler. Plus, the country that I really wanted to do spending time in closed their borders for 2 years and weren't letting people in or out. So
Australia?
Yikes. New Zealand.
Yeah.
So part of what I did was I started reinstituting domestic travel, small trips, getting out, spending time with friends, being by myself, all of those kinds of trips, and recalibrating what I think of as self-care. How do I take care of myself? What am I doing on a consistent basis that isn't a big thing like taking a trip?
Mm-hmm.
And adding new things to that, toolkit of how do I take care of myself so that I don't burn out, that I fill my cup.
I think what's interesting is that when you mention self-care, it cracks me up on how so many people think that self-care is literally, let me go take a bubble bath and let me go get a mani-pedi and go to brunch with my girls. Mm-hmm. I see all this stuff like hashtag self-care Sunday and you're drinking a mimosa. And I'm like, how is that self-care? You're still, you have to figure out, like you said, you have to figure out what your definition of self-care is,
Yeah.
And it's not going to be the same for everybody. And I totally vibe with what you were saying. Like, I feed off of everybody else's energy. Like, I love people. I love connecting. Mm-hmm. But when I'm done, like you, like when my day is entirely done, my bedroom door is closed. And it's like, please leave me alone.
Exactly.
I literally just want to watch reruns of Dallas and make fun of J.R. Ewing and veg out. Please leave.
Yeah.
It's a huge thing. And and for me, it's also an understanding that I love to travel. Travel has been something that I've had a passport and a mileage plus number with United since I was 6 months old.
Oh, wow.
So it's like in my blood.
It's in you. Yeah.
I've lived abroad multiple times. I travel everywhere. I don't ever say no to an adventure like that. Like, I'm that person that would go to the airport and buy a plane ticket for the day.
Yeah.
Right.
I feel like I want to go on an adventure with Anna one day.
I feel like I do too. I feel like,
where are we going?
Where are we going to go, Anna? Just let us know.
Yeah.
Pick someplace with good food and we will have a foodie experience.
Can we go? Can we go to Tuscany? Can we just, can we just do that?
I've also heard South America. I have a friend who's been trying to get me down there.
How I feel about snakes. You know how I feel about. We had this conversation about snakes last night.
Buenos Aires.
Nope. Not happening. Nope.
Tuscany.
FaceTime me, okay? But if you're going to South America, FaceTime me. Okay.
Yeah. Food everywhere. But it can be as simple as like 2 days in New York, or even, my limit of like 36 hours in Vegas. But
there is a limit. There is a 36-hour limit.
But like 36 hours in Vegas, and it's all food.
Yes, and then we're done.
And we're done. All food and just sitting in front of the Bellagio watching the water.
And no casinos.
Yep.
And no casinos, no nightclubs,
no Thunder from Down Under, none of that. None.
No. Maybe the Baz Luhrmann show at the Venetian because it's
okay. But
that's it.
None of the strobe lights, night lights, 24/7, walking around at 2 a.m. thinking it's 2 p.m. type mentality.
Right. And no rum 151 slushies.
No, none of that. No, we're good. I think when we were in the pandemic, my cousin is like you, she's a huge traveler. Mm-hmm. And she was just going, like she was crawling the walls. Mm-hmm. And when it got back to when, the world opened up, so to speak, and we could travel again, she was ready to go overseas. I'm like, I'm not ready for that yet. Can we kind of focus on this part of the country? Because I would hate to be somewhere that
and have something go wrong.
And something go wrong. And we can't even drive to come home. Mm-hmm. I would rather rent a car to drive cross country as opposed to be trapped, for lack of a better word, and she kind of, when I spun it to her that way, she kind of had to recalibrate and kind of had to rethink, okay, well, there is some really cool stuff here.
Yeah, that's actually what I had the same reaction you did. I was like, I'm crawling the walls and I need to get out and do something and see go someplace different. Yeah. Not even someplace new to me, but just different from my house and my neighborhood and my grocery store. But I didn't want to get on a plane and cross an ocean or even go to Mexico. I was like, look, we have enough issues with how this is passing and traveling and what it means to be on a plane. Let's not compound that by adding different strains from different parts of the world to mix. So I traveled domestically. We took road trips. We went to Hawaii. I went to Hawaii with my family, which was probably the biggest deal that we had done at that point. And my brother proposed to my sister-in-law on that trip. Oh, it was gorgeous. But, I was really cautious. I also have a bunch of people in my family who are immune compromised. So like, we're being careful anyway. And I am, weirdly enough, I have been to 3 music festivals. I've been on more planes than anyone else in my family. I've been in more cities than anyone in my family since the pandemic. And I am the only one that hasn't gotten COVID.
Wow.
I've been vaccinated and I still haven't gotten it. So
amazing.
I'm counting myself lucky for that
Being
one.
Safe.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Oh, so good. I would love to talk a little bit more about the self-care stuff. I know Corey is all up in the self-care because I really liked this idea of how boundaries tie to self-care, which kind of you were indicating. And I think when we talk about self-care, especially as coaches, because every woman we coach is probably deficient in self-care. Would you say, Corey?
Yeah,
like they don't know how to do it, or they think it's a mani-pedi, like you said, or we're going to go have brunch.
We're going to have, I'm just going to do some self-care on Sunday. I'm just going to go to brunch with my girls. That's your self-care?
Yeah.
Okay. Can we talk about your financial self-care? Because how is that helping you?
Right.
Yeah.
So talk to us a little bit about like boundary setting as it pertains to self-care for you, like how you make that a part of your everyday.
I had a really hard time with boundaries for a really long time. I'm a caretaker by nature. I'm the oldest child. I am the queen of fixing it. I'm also the product of a divorced household and a multi-level divorced branches of my family. So there's a lot of all of us figuring out how to smooth the waters and take care of everybody else before we take care of ourselves. And my mom dying was my catalyst for saying, fuck that. Yep. I am so done fixing it for everybody else because I got to take care of myself before I take care of everybody else. I had to learn the whole put your mask on before you put a mask on somebody else philosophy. And that was hard. Like setting boundaries when you don't know how to set them is really hard. And the only way I actually learned how to do it effectively before my mom died was to live 3,000 miles away from my dad because he was the person I had the worst problems with.
Thank you so much for tuning in to part 1 of this conversation. We appreciate our listeners more than you could ever know. Stay tuned for part 2 coming soon. In the meantime, if you liked any part of what you heard, please, please, please do us a favor and follow the podcast so you never miss an episode. And if you're willing to go a step further, we would love for you to leave us a review and send this episode to a friend that you feel would be served by it in any way. We are so excited to finally share more about Catalyst, the community we are building in conjunction with this podcast. Our mission with Catalyst is to create an authentic, safe, and inclusive space for heart-centered, growth-minded, multi-passionate women to navigate their life's transitions, all by building meaningful relationships, learning from one another, and growing into the best version of themselves, and maybe even making the world a little bit better in the process. If you're interested in becoming a founding member of Catalyst, we would love to learn more about you and have you apply at wearecatalyst.social. Check it in the show notes. We only have a limited number of spots for this founding member round, so be sure to get your application in soon. Again, the website to apply is wearecatalyst.social. We look forward to the possibility of getting to know you on a deeper level and supporting you in navigating your life's transitions. We cannot wait to have you join us for the next episode. Until then, we encourage you to lean into your community and embrace the growth that inevitably happens when you're in transition. See you next week.